For today's Smart Talk, we are joined by Jeremy Hall, who's a technical sales and account manager at InstantGMP. For those unaware, InstantGMP supports small to mid-sized manufacturers of biopharmaceuticals, biotechnology, CBD, hemp, and pharmaceuticals by improving quality control and streamlining their overall process management. InstantGMP enables companies in these highly regulated industries to achieve more efficient, higher quality management of their manufacturing operations and supply chain. And it's with that mission in mind that Jeremy joins us today. Jeremy is going to be providing a general introduction to good manufacturing practices as a whole, and he'll also be discussing how they apply to small and or virtual pharmaceutical companies involved with clinical trials. So this is, a super important topic, and we really appreciate Jeremy taking the time out for us today to shed some light on the process. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Hall.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate it. Jake gave a great synopsis of what InstantGMP is all about, what we do. A little bit more background on me. I started working in a contract manufacturing organization, started as a purification chemist on the floor doing the manufacturing. And then after 2 years of that, moved into the quality side. So I was reviewing those records, coming up with new SOPs, revising SOPs, things along those lines. And then eventually I moved into InstantGMP. So my experience from GMP guidance is mainly in the pharmaceutical world. And by no means am I a consultant on GMP. I am just giving you my interpretation of what I've seen in the market and what our clients have actually led us to believe using our software. As far as questions are concerned, based on the number of people, you guys can put questions into the chat. Jake will then read those to me. I'm going to limit to about 2 questions per slide, 2 or 3. So if I don't get to your question right away, please feel free to contact Jake or me, and then I can get back to you with a response. But with further ado, let's hop right into the talk. So again, today we're going to be focusing on GMP compliance for small pharma or virtual biotechs. So we're hopping right off with the quality responsibilities for virtual companies, or again, this is for small pharma. So the majority of virtual biotechs are outsourcing a lot of their clinical and manufacturing because they are outsourcing it. That does not mean that the responsibility is no longer yours as far as quality is concerned. You as a sponsor are accountable to the FDA, not the CROs and CMOs if something goes wrong. So you need to have a quality system in place to ensure that this doesn't occur. By doing this, by making sure you have a quality system, you're improving investor confidence in your product and in your process, and you're also minimizing risk in your clinical trials. Virtual companies with the quality management reduce their risk overall through the standards of good manufacturing practices. And some of the things that you might think about when establishing a quality system are, you would need one for clinical studies and clinical materials, negotiate quality agreements with vendors and contractors, ensure vendors and contractors are qualified, review and approve production deviations, out of spec investigations. These are all quality responsibilities that even you as a virtual biotech or a small pharmaceutical company are responsible for. So now we're going to start talking about what a quality system is. And before we can actually get to what a quality system is, we need to understand what quality is. The general ideology of a quality product comes from the price of the good. We associate that just naturally. A higher price good means that it's of higher quality. From a regulatory standpoint, this is a misinterpretation. A quality product means it is meeting some type of specification. A specification is simply a standard to which you will hold a good. This can be self-derived based on your preference if it still complies with regulatory guidelines, but typically there is some backing by a regulatory agency. For the United States, it would be the USP or United States Pharmacopeia or the FDA. These guidelines, just like the FDA, are generalizations that a company can then interpret to best suit their needs. With quality, you need people to test if specifications are met and to enforce your site's quality ideals, which is what a quality control and quality assurance team is meant to do. Those individuals need to have procedures which they follow consistently to ensure a quality product. Put the above concepts all together and you have now generated a quality system for your company. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put those into the chat. So basic tenets of GXPs. Now GXPs is kind of the overarching theme of GMPs. They just stand for good practices. GXPs include GCP, GLP, GMP, but GXP is kind of the overarching theme. Now, when it comes to the FDA, the easiest thing to remember is following the mantra, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. Documentation to the FDA is encompassing of procedures to make a product, qualifications of personnel handling the product, facility layouts, historical data for products already shipped, shipping products, etc. Basically, if it pertains to the creation or a process that affects the creation of that product, then it should be documented. From an FDA standpoint, this is for consumer safety. If an adverse effect occurs after consumption or application, the FDA's mission is to pinpoint where in the process something different happened. Without documentation to support the efficacy of your product or data, the FDA will doubt any claims you make about your product. And what we can see here is just a list of all the different types of things you would need to document. And again, this goes down to the operator being trained on an individual process, or this could be the documentation on how you actually built your engineering or manufacturing facility. All of this needs to be documented because there are regulations for just about every aspect of whether or not it's building your building or telling you how to train your personnel correctly. So SOPs and policies are the foundation for GXP compliance. So the regulations that you will read either from the FDA or your local government agency, if you're in Europe or anything like that, they're written in very generic terms. This is because they want to give you a base idea of what they are looking for from a regulatory standpoint. But again, company A and company B may have a completely different manufacturing process, and they can't tell you exactly how manufacturing process A should be GMP versus how manufacturing process B should be GMP. Because they are different, they may involve different ingredients, they have to write them generically. What your purpose is, or what your goal is to read these interpretations and then put them down via an SOP, standard operating procedure, a master production record, maybe a quality system overview. All of these interpretations are going to help you build a GMP or quality system with your company. This is also why sometimes after you've written your SOPs, a regulator may come on site and you thought you believed you followed the regulation to the best of your ability, but from their perspective, based on the way they deem it as an interpretation, they may give you an observation or something along those lines that may not be that you are actively trying to be delinquent in the regulation. You were just trying to do it to the best of your abilities. This is why they would typically give you an observation, AKA a 483, to then rectify the issue. And then if they come back and it's been corrected, they don't have any issues. So who must follow CGMPs? So what we're looking at here are some really big verticals. So you have drug companies, medical device companies, dietary supplement companies, tobacco products, food and cosmetic. The easiest definition of who must follow CGMP is a consumer physically consuming this product? Are they applying it to themselves via like a cosmetic or a dietary supplement of sorts? Basically, it is impacting their body in some way, shape, or form, and they have to ingest or apply it. So with each different vertical, there come different GMP standards for them. Drug and medical device firms manufacture products that are used in the diagnosis of disease. So, you think of a pacemaker. Those have their own GMP process that they have to follow and regulations they have to meet. Dietary supplement firms are manufacturing orally delivered ingredients that are intended to supplement the diet. So again, if you're saying that this supplement is going to help you fill in the gap of your caloric deficit, you're only getting 2,500 or 22,000 calories a day. You're meant to have 25. They say that this is going to cover that. They have to be able to support that claim. Food and cosmetic companies must meet their own version of good manufacturing practices. Now, food and cosmetics are a different beast in and of themselves, but they do have their own GMP guidelines that is laid out by the FDA that if they fail to follow, the FDA can force them to recall a product. That was the wrong area. And then e-liquid manufacturers now have their own set of regulations, just as tobacco. So again, if the consumer is ingesting your product, good manufacturing processes need to be ingrained in your manufacturing to ensure, and this is kind of leading into the next slide, that you can produce a consistent quality product. And that's essentially what the purpose is. The FDA wants to make sure that what the consumer is taking is not going to harm them. And what the company who's selling the product has claimed about the product is also going to be in effect here. So if you follow the FDA requirements for good manufacturing practices, you wind up with a quality system that promotes making consistent and high quality products, then ensures your customer gets products from you that they can trust. That's one of the biggest things about GMPs, or at least the pharma industry. The market is based off of the consumer trust in your product. So again, if you don't have these GMPs, people aren't going to trust your product because you don't have the supporting data, the supporting information. If they don't trust it, they're not going to buy it, and you've done all this work for nothing. FDA guidance for phase 1 clinical trial materials, or CTM. So if you notice here, and everybody will have access to these slides after the talk, I'm gonna have Jake email these out, but this link that you see here will take you to FDA guidance on phase 1 clinical trials and how to best handle that. The biggest point to take away from the FDA guidelines is it covers small or lab scale production. So you don't need to have a GMP facility built at this point. And if you read the guidance for this, it will tell you that there are certain requirements, but they aren't on the same level of a GMP or a contract manufacturing organization for pharma. So now we're going to start talking about the requirements that are involved with, or some of the high-level requirements involved with phase 1 clinical trial materials. So one of the first requirements is QC procedures. Quality control procedures ensure that your product meets a quality standard set by yourself or a regulatory agency prior to consumption or application. Efficacy is the point here. If you follow the recipe to the letter, then you should have the ability to produce and reproduce the desired or intended result. Your product is only as good as the test or tests used to classify said product. If the procedure is ambiguous and poorly defined, the equipment control is inadequate, or data recording is inconsistent, then you do not have an efficacious process. Now, I understand for some R&D work, this of course isn't always true. However, even in R&D environments, recording data in real time, accurately, and consistently is still your GMP responsibility. So again, you may not have the same written procedures because you're determining them, and you may not know exactly what parameters are going to be put on your HPLC or your balance. But as you are making those adjustments to then determine how you plan to manufacture this moving forward, that is where data recording in real time is a big GMP responsibility. We talked about this earlier. We're going to cover it again. Requirements for cGMP documentation. Remember the FDA mantra here. If it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. GMP documentation involves production data, personnel training, quality management documentation, quality control testing, etc. CGMP documentation is the only way to move forward with drug development as well. The fastest way to market is to keep paperwork up to date and organized. So every time you go to the next phase, whether it's preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, getting to the next level is all documentation oriented. They're going to want to make sure that you've done your phase 1 trial and that it passed. Everybody, consumption in the human is safe at this point. Before you can move on, you have to verify that and have all supporting documentation. Now moving on to phase 2, you're trying to start establishing efficacy of the drug. You're talking about it's going to do reaction A in the human body that leads to result B. You can't get to that point again unless you have all of that documentation to support the previous level. Record keeping. So not only is recording all pertinent data important in maintaining current documentation, but record retention is also something you have to think about. Data retention is equally as important as up-to-date documentation. To give you an example why. If an adverse effect occurs, the FDA will come knocking. They're going to come see you. It is your responsibility at that point to provide them with your current and historical data regarding the product. This may include clinical trial data, distribution records, or equipment records. So again, in the event of an adverse reaction, if your drug has only been on the market for 2 years, the FDA is going to want to not only see everything that happened during the batching of those, the individual batch records, but they're going to want to see all the scientific work that went into, all right, well, it's only been out for 2 years and you've already had an adverse effect. What in your process of clinical trials, where did you miss something? Did you not test for a certain variable? If you don't have those records easily accessible and able to present to the FDA, there's going to be a lot of not so great things to follow afterwards. So retention of documentation is just as important as keeping your documents up to date. So now let's start talking about, what a quality management system looks like today and how it's currently evolving. So the old way, which I'm sure a lot of companies are familiar with, is the paper-based system. So the old way, you're using paper, you have a bunch of filing cabinets at your local at headquarters, or you have now purchased an off-site storage location to store all this documentation. It has to be at a certain humidity. It has to be it has to be fire resistant. All of this work has to be built in to save paper documents. Workflows are also not clear. You may have SOPs on how to operate using this workflow, but because it's a paper-based system, things can get misplaced, people can take time off, leave something at their desk, the workflow may get interrupted, or it just may not be clear. Training is also time-consuming with the old way. You have to work with a supervisor, they have to basically demonstrate what they need you to do in real time, you have to repeat it, it's just a waste of productivity for everybody. And then there's some type of constant executive oversight required, meaning that, the boss mans are worried about what was yesterday's production output. Why did we, or do we have any new deviations? And this is just everything that you see on the left of the old way is just lost productivity. What a lot of new clients are doing, or new virtual biotechs are starting to do, is they're starting to go electronic. They're moving to virtual web-based systems, which means no more paper, which also means no more filing cabinets. Everything can be stored on a web-based cloud system or on a local drive. With the virtual web-based systems, you're also getting guided workflows with autonomous processes. You don't need to worry about making sure that they did thing A before doing thing B, because the workflow is built into their whatever software you end up moving with, and it guides them, keeps a lot of the human error out of the process. Training through learning management systems, again, you don't have to worry about the supervisor standing there and making sure that they know how to read their SOP effectively. Newer learning management systems, you can issue quizzes, get certificates, and automate a lot of the training, and then really only save the, what I would call on-the-job trainings. You can save those for the supervisor because that can't be handled through an LMS. And then the last thing with the new direction companies are moving is minimum executive oversight required. The boss isn't having to worry about, yesterday's production output anymore because he's getting daily reports sent to him. Or if he needs to know what the status of the current production batch is, he doesn't have to go and find the supervisor or the project lead. He can just log in and go look at his batch records. So again, moving away from the paper-based system, you're gaining a lot of productivity through virtual means. And this is, again, just trying to highlight some of the higher level things that a virtual system can do. Manage quality for virtual biotechs, minimize the executive personnel involvement, organizing your documents, online collaboration. That's another fantastic thing with virtual. So you don't have to worry about working on a Word document, emailing it to so-and-so, making sure they see the email, and then emailing it back. All of this can be done through a software, and everybody gets constant updates in real time. Keeps track of vendor activities and contracts, so you don't need to worry about spreadsheets anymore. And it just provides one place to manage and maintain quality functions required for small biotech. So again, coming from where I come from, the CMO I used to work for, we had a change control log, we had a kappa log, we had a deviation log, we had an incident log, and then we had the actual deviation reports. All of that information I had to, anytime I needed to have an audit done, I had to go find each one of those logs, then copy them, and then put them in a separate file for the auditor. With virtual, you don't need to worry about that. Everything is breadcrumbed together. It's all strung together for you. So you don't need to worry about having to hound down a change control log entry from 2003. And then autonomous processing, of course, keeps activities moving on their own. You don't need to wait for me to come in to sign off because I was on vacation. These type of things can be automated. Or if it is waiting for my signature, because it is virtual, I don't have to be on site anymore. I can just sign by logging back into the software, and now it's done. So GMP batches and non-GMP areas, this is what we were talking about earlier with the phase 1 clinical trial material. InstantGMP, the software that we sell, it complies with FDA guidance for phase 1 supplies. CROs can do GMP work in the same equipment / lab as the development work is happening. Tox batch can be made GMP and used in phase 1 trials, and medical device developers can produce GMP finished products. So again, our software, again, we're not going to get into that too much, but we've built out this software with GMP in mind, and the whole software foundation was built to be in compliance if the FDA ever came knocking and wanted to inspect the software. As a small aside, we have had clients who have undergone an FDA audit utilizing our software and actually had more observations prior to the product and actually came back with less or 0 observations after using the product. And again, this is because the software that we've built has the GMPs built in. You don't need to worry about me or Jake having to remember, did we follow CFR guidelines section 1.18, paragraph 3, subparagraph 2. We don't have to worry about that. And lastly, this is the InstantGMP software. So all of the concepts that I covered today, as far as quality management, maintaining records, doing batches, tracking inventory, making sure you have material requirements planning, all of this functionality, all of this capability or drive you may have to become more GMP is built into this product. But with that, I am ending quite a bit early. I would love to hear some questions from the audience, whether it be about GMP compliance as a whole or in regards to the product.
Cool, thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, so if anyone has questions, feel free to enter them into the chat, or you can also unmute yourself if you prefer to ask directly. Jeremy, I was curious while anyone's thinking of questions. When you were speaking about the move to quality management systems going virtual, is that something that started somewhat recently? Was that happening a little bit before these COVID times, or is that something that's really kind of ramped up more recently?
So it's been the market has been driving that way. Unfortunately, a lot of the pharmaceutical companies, because they put so much work into the old way of making sure that their paper system was flawless, it's been difficult to get them to believe in a newer, updated system. However, ever since cloud-based data saving has become a thing, more pharmaceutical companies are realizing that, you know, having an offsite storage filled with 112 filing cabinets of data isn't the best use of their finances or their resources. And so even though they may not like it, they are heading in that direction. And especially with this new COVID interaction with the market, a lot of people are now having to work virtually, and this paper-based system is not helping them in any way, shape, or form. So having a virtual means more people are interested in that. They want to know that their data is safe, that it's secure, and it's accessible regardless of where they are, because they may not be guaranteed to be in the office now.
Gotcha. Cool. It looks like we have a question from Julia here. She asks, how early do you recommend early stage med tech startups to start thinking about a QMS for FDA clearance? And what are some early questions that can be asked while setting one up?
All right. So just a question for you, Jay. Can I see these? How would I pull these up?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with Zoom.
Yeah. So if you scroll to the bottom of the screen, buttons pop up. You might have to hit the one that says more, and then there's a chat.
So how early do you recommend early stage med tech startups to start thinking about a QMS for FDA clearance? So we'll start with that one. For virtual biotechs, if they are looking at a software platform or quality management system like this, of course, you need to have the financial means first and foremost, because we at InstantGMP, we pride ourselves on being one of the more affordable ones, but even so, early stage med techs, they just don't have the funding for that. So first and foremost, make sure you have your funding. If you do have the funding and that's not a concern, then I don't see why you shouldn't start with a QMS system moving forward, because it's going to make life a lot easier. One of the biggest hangups with virtuals, if you've already been started with the paper-based system, is that transitionary period. That is the biggest hurdle, is what we call the construction phase in the virtual means. So if you have the means, starting from scratch there is much easier. You don't have to worry about this implementation period anymore, because you just started from scratch moving forward. And then what are some early questions that can be asked while setting one up? I think the first question you asked is honestly what you should be asking when you're setting one of these up, is kind of, this is where we're at in our process. Do you think this is the right time? Most of the time, or at least if the person you're searching for the product knows their product well enough, they will be able to tell you whether or not. We think you're a little bit early for this. We think if you reach this level, then we think you would start really getting functionality out of our system. We're still not sure if we're class 1 or class 2 exempt or not, trying to contact the FDA. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm reading your responses as they are coming through. So what are some early questions that can be asked? So one you can think of beyond just, you know, should we go with this now, is how secure is my data? You're starting with NCE drugs, new chemical entities, so you need to make sure that your data is secure. You don't want some hacker to end up with your data or your proprietary information on a new drug, and now it's, you know, on Reddit. You don't want that. So security is first and foremost. Transitioning. So if you're going to start with a QMS system of quality management, how easy is it going to be to transition if you guys are planning to do manufacturing on your own? How easy is it to transition from just data storage, you know, quality management, reports, toxicology data? How do we go from that using this software to the manufacturing process? Some people are niche markets and they only sell QMS software. Others, such as InstantGMP, the QMS aspect is actually just a subsection of the overall software. So we have plenty of clients who come with our software. they only start with the QMS as a clinical client, but then as they start progressing and moving on to those later stages, they start buying more modules so they can start tracking their inventory and their manufacturing process using the same GMP software that got them up to this point. So those are some of the questions that I can think of. G, how would it be possible for a medical product company to focus on commercial first before applying FDA approval and not marketing ourselves as medical product? FDA ladder and C. So first before applying FDA approval. About the problem with large.
It's more orally, I guess. I didn't write it grammatically correct.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So would we not worry about the problem if we cooperate with large manufacturers like 3M or J&J? I think that last part really is what kind of clears it up there. Johnson & Johnson, as an example, they are just riddled with the FDA regulations because of the variety of products that they can produce. So Johnson & Johnson themselves are going to vet you in a way that makes sure that you are a qualified or a verified vendor, or at least they should be. If they're not, they are failing to follow their FDA regulations. But if they have gone through their vetting process and they can prove without a shadow of a doubt that you are a qualified vendor or you're a verified vendor, then again, I am not a consultant, so please bear with me on this. I'm giving you my best interpretation. But if you're working with 3M and J&J and they don't see a problem with your product, I don't see why the FDA would at the same time. Now, the issue with that is, and there is a caveat to that, is if J&J has an adverse effect using your product, the FDA is not going to just stop at J&J. They're going to come see you too. That's why it's so important to build the CGMP practices early, because if you don't have a quality system to record all of your data and maintain all of those records, then when the FDA comes knocking, what may end up happening is they may turn around and say that your product doesn't meet their standards and that J&J shouldn't use you as a verified vendor anymore. So again, you are taking a lot of risk by not doing that. But as far as if you're working with a far larger company like Johnson & Johnson, you would really have to look at the regulations as far as what Johnson & Johnson's responsibility would be with you as a vendor. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. I also have another question. So if we're not working with those large corporations, can we just actually be commercial first, just like selling to the normal consumers before jumping into the medical product market? So we don't need to go through the hospital procurement team. We don't need to go through the health provider. We just market ourselves as a product, not a medical product. And later on, when we have enough budget, we go into run our CGMP and the FDA approval later. Would that be a strategy that's workable, or that will create some problems later?
So you have to, all right, yeah. So I think that's a strategy that works. And I think the best way I can talk about this is dietary supplements. So I'm going to bridge those two to help it make sense, because medical devices isn't my strong suit. So I'm going to bridge it to the best of my ability. Dietary supplements, there's very specific ingredients that if they add to a product, only those ingredients have to be GMP. They have to have regulations and specifications. Everything else they add to it is just, it doesn't have to be regulated. And so the other aspect that comes with this is advertising. So if you're advertising your product as a X, Y, and Z, it's going to make your life better. Or you're saying people who have used our medical product have seen a 80% reduction in their heart attacks. I'm going with a pacemaker as an example. And you say that, and then the results come back and it's only 20%, that's a marketing issue. And then you're actually saying that a product will do something that it doesn't. The FDA can come down on you for saying that a product does something and then it doesn't do what you're saying it's going to do. Now, again, this is also depending on how you're marketing yourself. So when you market it, you do have to be very careful about that, because the minute the FDA catches something about you're saying that it should do or it will do this, rather than, well, if you drink enough green tea, your antioxidant levels will increase. That's just a fact that can't be disputed. It's very gray. So I'm very hard pressed to land on one side or the other, but it's a matter of how you market it and how you are explaining what the product is intended to do for the consumer. Does that answer your question? Thank you. So these are great questions. So we heard from Julia and we've heard from Jiao. I'm glad to hear from both of them again, but do we have any other individuals who would like to ask a question?
All right. Well, Jeremy, if we don't have any other questions come in, I just want to say thank you. Really appreciate your time and your insight on this. And is there, if anyone happens to think of more questions, would you like me to provide, some contact or maybe resources?
Yes. By all means, share my information because again, I am not a consultant, a GMP consultant. I am giving you my experience on the market. But we at InstantGMP, we have partnerships with GMP consultants. So we could actually put you in contact with them and they will let you know, like for instance, how you were asking that question about, how, if I don't say it's a medical product, if you ask them that question, they will be able to tell you whether or not that's okay or not. So if you guys email me that and you would like to be in contact with them, I'm glad to share that by all means. But from Jake's perspective, please share my information with everybody.
All right, great. Well, be sure to do that. And thank you again. And thank you everyone for coming out. Really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you at another session.
Yes, guys, thank you so much for your time and thank you for your questions. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
All right, everyone. Take care.